And I heard a positive sound coming from your speaker. Is that?
Yes, I think this is working.
Thank you so much, Johnny and Joe, for working on that. Our featured speaker today is Alexis Potaman, well known to this community. And I'm going to read the intro that I was provided. Despite being landlocked for the majority of her life and traumatized by the movie Titanic, Alexis has been in love with the ocean since the age of 8. You're from Lubbock, right?
Yeah.
Lubbock, okay. She received her bachelor's degree in marine biology from the University of Texas and her master's in marine resource management from Texas A&M Galveston. She has worked on various projects including cardiology, algal biofuel production, and storm surge prevention. And she approached me a while back, said she had an idea for a talk on hurricanes and wanted to do it. I said it sounds like a great topic. So let's welcome Alexis to the
Okay, so hi, I'm Alexis. I'm really excited that the microphones are working. So Houston Oasis actually has the distinction of being the first group I've ever talked to that hasn't been a research symposium or a group of 8-year-olds. So congratulations. So this is my original title slide. I didn't change the title from what Mike and I had discussed. But in addition to buying batteries, making sure you have a radio for your own individual homes for hurricane preparedness, there are things that we can be doing on a regional level to prepare for the next hurricane. So real quick, now you may not have been on the beach during a hurricane, but how many of you have been gone through a hurricane? Yeah. A lot of us in the room. Now, do any of you live near the coast, kind of in a storm surge zone area? Y'all, yeah.
Operative word used to.
So what are some things that are some damages that would come with hurricanes? Just throw out some ideas.
Trees falling down.
Trees falling down.
Power outage.
Power outage.
Roof flies off.
Flooding.
As a famous comedian said, it's not that the wind is blowing, it's what the wind is blowing.
Perfect. Any other ideas?
Broken glass.
Storm surge. He knows what I'm talking about. All right. So heavy rain, some wind, everything that the wind is blowing. Is this too dark?
Yes.
Too dark? Okay, well, the slides will change a little bit. Lights? No? Okay. Yeah, you have heavy rain, wind, storm surge. For people living right along the coastline, storm surge is a really big deal. So most of us have probably seen the picture of the last house standing on Bolivar Peninsula, where a lot of the other homes surrounding it were damaged by storm surge or by wind. And this is actually not the only house standing. The picture just makes it look very devastating, because it was. So this is just a quick little map. So here's where Hurricane Ike went right through the Houston Ship Channel of San Jacinto, right over Galveston Island. And most of the damage was off here over to the east. Just some real quick inundation maps. This is how much water was covering these areas. The area where that last house standing would have been right here. So a really narrow area, and the water, the storm surge just washed right over. And so it devastated those houses in that area. You can see that for the Houston Ship Channel, in the Houston area, we didn't have a lot of storm surge. We were really, really, really lucky. There was 22-foot storm surge. With Katrina, they had 25 feet. So had Hurricane Ike gone just a little further to the west around San Luis Pass, if you know where that is, all of this storm surge on this side would have been right here, right up Houston, right up the Ship Channel. And just a quick elevation map. So you have 20 feet is this pink right here, 25-foot elevation is the purple. You have Clear Lake, you have League City, you have Kemah, all of that is right there, and you have all of these businesses and oil containers right along the Ship Channel that could easily have been inundated. with Hurricane Ike. And that was a Category 2 when it came ashore at Galveston. So, what do we want to protect? Do we just want to focus on our individual homes? You know, try to evacuate if you can. Hopefully you don't get stuck on the highways. We want to do our oil and gas. We want to do lives and property. What about the environment? Do we want to take those things into consideration? So, just some quick fun facts. You don't have to read all of it. But the Port of Houston is the second largest port in the nation. It's actually the first in terms of foreign tonnage. So we have a lot of stuff coming through the area. And on top of that, a quarter of the nation's oil and gas comes through the Houston complexes. So if our complexes go down, that's a huge loss for the entire United States, that we can't get those complexes back up and running. And on top of that, we have over 6.1 million people at this point living in the Houston metroplex as a whole, and that number is only going to keep increasing. And I don't know if any of you have gone down to Galveston recently, but a lot of people are heading that way. So we are very, very vulnerable. So is there anything we can do? I wouldn't be here if there wasn't anything we could do. All right, so one option is we could retreat. That is an option that's being thrown around. One of the ways they would do this is they would get rid of flood insurance for those living on the barrier islands. Although if you notice, they let Galveston keep their flood insurance. So if you're living on the coastline, if you're living on a barrier island, you build a house, a storm comes through, your house gets washed away, you either have the money to rebuild or you don't, and you move away. That's what their thinking is. So that's one of the non-physical methods that they've proposed that we could implement. Some physical methods include using zone defense. So the Rice Speed Center, and please no one ask me what SPEED stands for because I tried to memorize it and it did not work. Has proposed that each individual area focus on their own defense. Their rationale is it's too expensive, and each area is, and it's true, geographically different. So each region should focus on what they want to protect, and they can best implement those ideas for themselves. Now, so here on the map, you have Freeport, they have a levee system. Texas City has a dike system in place, which is why if you look at the inundation maps, they didn't have hardly any damage from storm surge during Hurricane Ike, which is good for them. But the Speed Center suggests that we put a gate right at the entrance to the Houston Ship Channel. You raise Highway 146 along there and create a levee system. And they've also proposed putting a ring system around Galveston and Pelican Island. So, Centennial Gate, that would be at the entrance to the Houston Ship Channel, right at the base of the San Jacinto River. And this would go in with a surrounding levee or dike system. And so, basically you would have a swinging gate system, this is CGI, a swinging gate system that would close whenever a storm is approaching and would be open the rest of the time for whenever ship traffic is coming through. So, this would go with Highway 146. Their proposal is that they would raise Highway 146 to be a levee. The schematics that they have, you can drive on top of it, you'd be going through, but you would have to you have the Centennial Gate right up here, and then you'd have a gate system and levee systems at each of those yellow dots, if you can make them out. So you'd have to put in some sort of movable barrier, if you will, at each one of those channel openings. So this is part of where I want some feedback. Does anyone see some potential problems with this? What? Traffic, I heard.
Severity of the storm.
Severity of the storm.
Who gets flooded and who doesn't?
Who gets flooded and who doesn't?
Yeah, because the ports are just east of 146, and so those all get flooded.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it tend to get the water in if you're getting flooded from the other direction?
That's a good question. And I'm going to get back to the who gets flooded, who doesn't. So, and this goes for a couple of other ones. But yeah, is a rain system, like Tropical Storm Allison just sat on top of Houston for days and flooded it. The idea is, in the event of something like that, they would open the gates and let the water out. But that is a very potential problem, especially, I would think, for the Clear Lake area and all these areas right here along the channel, that would build up pretty quickly.
I saw an article in the Houston Chronicle several years ago that the whole area is basically sliding into the bay anyway, so what would be the upkeep of this over time?
That's a good question. I have not, like in all of the articles, they've not mentioned anything like that. But yeah, there's sliding, there's subsidence, there's a lot of physical problems that could easily go wrong. But yeah.
What about financial responsibility? Yeah.
Very good question. Ask me that at the end of the presentation. Okay, but yeah, who gets flooded, who doesn't get flooded? That's a very, very good point, because everywhere on this side of the highway, you're going to have all that storm surge, and then it's going to build up right there at the wall, and you have Kemah, you have Bogcliff, if I'm saying that right? Baycliff, yeah, you have all of those communities on the bay side of Highway 146. And Brandon, I saw.
Yeah, I was wondering that if one of those gates went down, would it cause flooding throughout a lot of them?
Yes.
So it's like it's only as strong as the weakest link.
Yes, exactly. So if, yeah, you have all of these gates. If one goes down, all that water is going to go rushing in at that one exact point. So, but there are some pros. You know, it would protect everyone on the other side of it. You know, not bad. So another proposal, and this is the Galveston ring system. It would only protect the traditional part of Galveston Island. It wouldn't protect Jamaica Beach, Pirates Beach, the entire rest of the west end that the map does not show. They did concede and actually added Pelican Island, where A&M is right there, and a lot of other ports that they're putting in. So again, you'd have little gates at every yellow point that could easily break, and it's only as strong as its weakest point. So another option is a coastal spine, or it's been coined as the Dike. I don't know if anyone's heard that in the news. This goes after a Dutch model that you shorten the coast and you just stop it all at the coast, rather than letting the water come in and everyone does their own thing. You just stop it before it even gets into the bay. And kind of going with Gary's idea of what would happen if it sat on us and it rained for a while. This option, they would close the main gate right here at the Bolivar Roads at low tide. So Galveston Bay would be at its lowest point. So I want to say, don't quote me on this, but you probably will, there's like a 10-foot difference, retention, that Galveston Bay could be used as a retention pond. So things could still drain out into the bay. And so this method, you have the existing seawall right here. Rather than extend the existing seawall, you would extend the protection afforded by the seawall. So what the Dutch have done is they've put hardcore barriers. So essentially they've done more or less like a cement wall, a revetment, along their beaches, but they've covered it up to, it looks like a sand dune. So it's still your normal, you go to the beach, you walk over the sand dunes, it looks the same. There's also some environmental reasons behind it. It kind of keeps the grasses growing, it traps sand, and I don't know if anyone is familiar with how water works when it hits a cement barrier like the seawall. It erodes a lot of the sand. So there's more upkeep associated with the seawall than with a natural barrier. So in addition to this, we'd have one gate there at so you can keep it open with ship channel activities, and you have another gate down at the San Luis Pass. So, and this is the idea of what it would look like. There are other options. There's one where the wall lays flat on the seawall or on the seafloor and it rises up. There's some upkeep issues with that. There are inflatable barrier methods. There's smaller gate methods. And so it would just depend on which one they find that works best with the needs of the area. But the Dutch have found that this model has worked pretty well for them. Okay. So why does this matter? Why does this matter? It's all about the money. So, who is going to fund this? All right. That'd be great. So who's going to fund this? The 146 Centennial Gate, that would all be local bond elections. So that's why I'm telling you this, is there's a very good chance that one or both of these will end up on a ballot here soon. There's not any chance of it being there like this year, next year maybe not, but here pretty soon you'll probably see one of them. Now the Dike system, this coastal spine, that would be an 85%, in the past, projects like this have been 85% federal and 15% local or state. So there'd be the option of state funding in there as well. In addition to that, we would be responsible for 0.5% of the construction cost for annual upkeep. So, and then, you know, Stephanie asked, you asked who was responsible? You want to know how much it costs? Yes. So the Centennial Gate alone, they're estimating for $1 billion for just the Centennial Gate. For the coastal spine, they're estimating somewhere between 4 and 6 billion. So that's something else to consider. So are we ready? Hurricanes occur in the Houston, Galveston area, major hurricanes, once every 15 years. So it's not a question of will there be another major hurricane? It's when. When is there going to be another major hurricane? And we're not ready. We haven't really done anything to prepare as a region for the next hurricane. So, are there any more questions? This is really short. Yes.
Is there anything being done about limiting our exposure, to expanding exposure? I mean, before we even start talking about preventing something, keeping the problems from getting bigger.
There have been, the talk has been thrown around, but there's not been anything to say you can't build here, you can't build here. There's really nothing to stop the spread of people. Yeah. As Natalie saw first.
I want to understand this better.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned 85% of that would be federal funding. Does that include, and is there a conversation about using FEMA money, like money that are usually given to places after a disaster happens, using that money preventively before a disaster happens, which is going to be probably a lot less costly than patching
Yes.
later?
Great question. Theoretically, yes, that has been thrown around because it is a lot less expensive to spend money for prevention rather than afterwards. But in this country, we kind of have a tendency to focus on, well, we'll wait until it happens and then we'll, throw money at the system to fix it. So the idea has been thrown around in more academic circles that we should try to get some of that FEMA money, but there's nothing been really hard and set on that. But great question.
With the Dike, if you're essentially fencing off Galveston Bay, one would assume it would get more fresh water. How hard and how significant would the environmental impact on that area be?
That's a great question. That would be a very significant issue. So this will go into some other stuff. The Galveston Bay is kind of in a bad situation already because freshwater inflows are already low. And so that is one thing. The gate would be open whenever there's not a hurricane. But it does raise the question, would we be getting the saltwater up into the bay like it should be? Oyster reefs, they need the saltwater. And a lot of our fishing economy harvests oyster reefs. So all that, lack of saltwater would be bad, but then also too much saltwater is also bad. So there are some very interesting environmental consequences that could come from the Dike. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
More or less, it's complicated. No one really knows.
Exactly. Exactly. There's also, one second. But there's also the question of how is it going to affect the water flow, like how the turbulence, Where will animals be able to understand what's going on? Will they get through? How is it going to impact how it flows? There's been talk about kind of putting more of a dike out into it and then just having one gate rather than having the entire thing open. So there's some definitely, no one really knows.
Are they also in these plans taking into account the estimated sea level rise due to climate change, and how much is that going to affect what these can withstand?
They're not taking that into account.
Seems rather short-sighted.
Yes, 146. Neither project they're really taking it into account. 146, they're definitely not really taking it into account because I think they're planning on only elevating it 25 feet, which with Katrina was 25 feet. This with Ike was 22 feet. So it's kind of pushing it, and then you factor in a couple inches sea level rise, and you also factor in subsidence. And then something none of these plans take into account is actually flooding changes with the more buildings you put on it, the more people you have, because the ground can't soak it in, you have more concrete. So they're not really taking that into account. It is very short-sighted. Yeah.
Just buy the coast back and put it back to wild.
That is another option that they've put around, is to put a national recreation area in along the coast that they would have to buy back a lot of land and just no one,
Let's do 2 more questions.
Okay.
Susan and then
Susan and
Would you please remind me or us who they is, and
Sorry.
the Dutch. Is there a
Okay.
consensus among the Dutch?
Okay, so for the last question, I was talking about the speed center
plans.
specifically. Yeah. The Dutch, there is a consensus. They've already put into place a coastal spine. So they already have a coastal spine in place. So the Ike Dike,
For us, though.
for us, they have not put up, there's talks for it. They've been working with A&M Galveston, which is how I know about the Ike Dike. And so they have the consensus for themselves. And so the Ike Dike coastal spine barrier copies what they've done pretty much and factors in individual changes. Is that?
But the they who are doing this planning is A&M primarily?
Sorry. The 146 zone defense is Rice. They have a center, Rice Speed Center. They're doing 146 in the Centennial Gate. And for the coastal spine and for the Ike Dike is Texas A&M Galveston.
At the cost levels you mentioned, how many years of protection will these projects provide?
Great question. Again, it kind of goes into sea level rise. For the Ike Dike, realistically, they're saying it will last. With both projects, they're saying it will last as long as you want it to last. Probably, I'd say 10, 15, 20 years, depending on the materials used. A lot of what they're also doing is looking at the new levee system that they have for New Orleans. Because just as a comparison, the New Orleans levee system cost $15 billion. And it took 2 years to construct, 2.5 years to construct. So they're saying 2 years to construct plus at least 10 years of future protection.
let's thank Alexis for this. That was totally fascinating. Thank you, Alexis. Put me in the mood to stop off at Costco and get a pallet of drinking water on the way.